Josh, thanks very much for that presentation around the importance of sampling in the feed mill. And I think we have to start with this concept around the sampling error. So many presentations you see around mycotoxin analysis always come back to this point around sampling error, and 80–90% of that error of mycotoxin analysis is coming from how well the sample was taken or not, as the case may be. So maybe just start there, Josh, and talk to us about the fact of, if we don't take a good sample, should we bother taking the sample at all?
Yeah, so if you are taking poor samples at your feed mill, you're essentially just throwing your money down the drain when in aspects of taking mycotoxin tests. For example, say you pull a poor sample and it comes back really low in mycotoxins. Well, in reality, you really didn't give a good representation of what that load of feed or what was in that silo, and you may have just missed the pocket of mycotoxins. And then all of a sudden you're seeing poor performance in the species you're feeding. Nutritionist or farm management comes back to the feed mill, and then you're searching for a problem that may or may not exist in the feed mill.
And how much of that then is related more to an issue with mycotoxins, as say, if you think about protein or energy, do we have more of an issue with sampling error in mycotoxins than we do for some of those other macronutrients, for example?
So I would tell you that sampling for mycotoxins is a proper sample for mycotoxins is much more important because of how sporadic toxins can be in a load. Like if you had a truck with 3 different hoppers on it, the first 2 hoppers may be extremely clean. The back hopper may be, very contaminated with mycotoxins. Whereas if you just pull a sample for that load on the front hopper, you're not representing the entire load. Whereas like a protein level in corn, it's going to be fairly consistent throughout that entire that entire load, at least consistent enough where you're not going to throw off things by taking a really poor sample. Now, it's still very important to take a proper sample when testing for protein, but even more so with mycotoxins.
So if you think about some of the more common errors that you see around sampling, is one of them the number of samples that feed mills or operators are taking from a truck, for example, or even if they're doing the stream cutting method, they're not taking 10, they may be taking 2 or 3. Is that one of the main issues we have?
Yeah, it is. And the reason is a lot of times the employees taking these samples, they just don't know the importance of it, and it's very important for mills and managers to train whoever's taking these samples to understand the importance of it, and actually how much money you could be wasting your company by not taking a proper sample, whether that be searching around for a problem that doesn't exist because you took a poor sample, or just getting false information from that sample. So yeah, and then another thing is, we have to at the mills, we have to make it very easy for the mills or the mill employees to collect these samples. We can't have them hanging off trucks trying to take a proper sample. A lot of mills will build types of structures around their receiving areas where employees can easily access the tops of trucks, just to make them comfortable.
Yeah, if you follow on from that, really, I suppose, highlights the importance that if a feed mill is going to look at putting in place a quality control program around mycotoxins, everybody needs to be bought into what that entails in terms of the time it takes for an employee to actually take a good sample. What's the infrastructure around taking that sample, like you say, some sort of infrastructure to get up and be able to access the truck, and also the sampling tool. So do you see that from experience, how some feed mills have actually set up that whole infrastructure a lot better than others who have just really just, given the guys a sampling probe and said, off you go.
Yeah, for sure. It's pretty shocking at the number of mills I go to that actually don't even have a type of probe to take a sample. They just have the coffee cup in the corner that they pull a sample off the grain while it's flowing into the mill, and that's their sample. And that's just not good practice. A lot of these probes they're not expensive, at least for just a hand probe. It's well worth the investment. They last forever. But then, a lot of the mills, they'll have these really nice hydraulic vacuum probes that suck the sample into the quality lab, where then it can be tested right away. And that's when a mill is on board with their sampling program. They've invested in the equipment, and the employees can easily pull the samples without putting themselves in harm's way.
And in that situation, still with the right equipment and the more advanced equipment, that concept of the number of probes per truck, that still holds true.
Yes, for sure. We still have to do our due diligence to follow the sampling plan. Pulling one or two probes off of a truck is definitely not a good representation. We recommend pulling at least 10 throughout a load, and if you have divide that into your hoppers that you're pulling. Obviously, if you're pulling samples off of a rail car or something much larger, a barge, something like that, you're gonna have to take more than 10.
And ultimately, though, for scenarios like that, there are then separate protocols that one would follow if we're looking at a big lot along those lines.
Right.
When we look at the feed mill, then one of the things that you didn't touch on in the presentation, but I wonder if you make a few comments about now, is how do we adjust the sampling based on the season or the risk that we're seeing, different feed ingredients? Are there different sampling plans or frequency of sampling that we should be thinking about?
I think the way you sample needs to be consistent, no matter what's going on in your feed mill. Now, some mills that may not be feeding as many birds or making or species, feeding as many animals or making as many tons of feed, their testing may not need to be as much during like the summertime, whereas during harvest, when we're seeing all these trucks come into the feed mill, that's when I think we need to pay attention to our mycotoxin reports for the year, and kind of make adjustments as needed, depending on how heavy the load of toxins are for the year. And then as regionally, you need to make those adjustments. Maybe worse in your county than the next county over. So just things like that to pay attention to, and then to adjust your sampling protocols accordingly. But the way you take a sample should never change.
So ultimately, when you're taking that sample, doesn't matter whether you're sampling a low risk ingredient, a higher risk ingredient, whether your frequency is higher or lower, the actual physical act of taking a sample, people still need to follow their due diligence and follow the protocol that's been set out, so that the results from that sample can be taken with the confidence that we want.
Exactly. And there's no reason to change your sampling protocol for mycotoxins versus a protein level. It needs to just be consistent. So mill employees, do the same exact thing every time.
Because ultimately that sample they take can be used then for a multitude of different nutrients and other contaminants.
Right.
Excellent, Josh. It's been really useful chatting that through. Maybe before we go, are there any sort of key takeaways? Are there some things that you've seen out there from experience that have been sort of really positive or really negative that is worth highlighting before we sign off?
No, I would just say really do good training. I've been to mills where you look at their protocols and they have great protocols, and you go out to the feed mill, ask employees about their protocols, and they have no idea. Or you know, you may see a protocol where there's a sampling probe involved in the protocol, and you go out to the mill and they say, well, we lost that 5 years ago, and now we just use that coffee cup in the corner. So make sure you guys are at the feed mills are auditing these systems. You know, have your managers hold the employees accountable for following these procedures, and I think you'll have a successful sampling program.
Fantastic. Thanks very much, Josh. Been really helpful, and we'll look forward to speaking with you again over the next few weeks on Microbites.
Thanks.